Welcome to In the Lab with Hoopsology. I am your host, Matt Thomas, joined by my co-host, Justin Goodrum. Justin, how you doing, man?
Doing good. How about yourself, man?
Doing well. It's a busy week. Youth basketball in Albuquerque, New Mexico has picked up. So we've got games or practices every night this week. It's really season in full swing here, but things are good. Can't complain. What about you?
Yeah, nothing new with me. Just a lot of news just in terms of the streaming wars, and then just this NFL football this weekend, and then you got the Royal Rumble this weekend, and then just a lot of news in the sports world. So not a lack of things that are exciting to talk about. So
For sure, for sure. All right, I'm going to put you on the spot. Give me 60 seconds on WWE going to Netflix or Raw going to Netflix anyway. Thoughts on that?
good for fans. Everybody has a Netflix account. Bummer is that that subscription fees are going to go up.
Ah,
Um, However, I would say in terms of a rights increase, what the stock market said, they seem like they're happy about it, even though I think WWE wanted 50%. They got about 20 to 30% right increase. So overall, I think good for WWE, good for AEW. So they don't have to worry about WWE coming after them for Warner Brothers Discovery. So overall, good all around. We'll see what happens. But I would say if you're, into having a cable box or a Comcast subscription, I'd be pretty worried right
interesting. Yeah, big news. I mean, it was surprising to me when I saw it.
now.
And also I think not to belabor this topic, but just Netflix getting into live sports. Even though it's wrestling entertainment, some people look at that differently. It is kind of a live sport type of experience when that
Well,
airs.
that's the interesting thing because it kind of ties into what we cover, which is with the NBA in terms of their streaming rights being up.
Right.
Because with Netflix, they flirted with Formula One, didn't get it. I heard they flirted with tennis, didn't get it. And with Netflix, for years, everybody's been saying, "Oh, well, Netflix is going to get into sports," but they don't have like the infrastructure on their interface to really have that compared to like a Paramount Plus or a Peacock or even HBO or Max. That now, in terms of they have news and they have their sports that really work seamlessly. So this is a big test for Netflix to see when you're having about 2 to 3 million people watch a stream congruently every single week. We haven't really seen that,
Mm.
and we'll see what happens. I mean, this is a live stream, so this is kind of like a huge experiment somewhat with the number one streamer. So if this goes well with WWE and they get subscribers, you know we'll see if they're going to be a player in other live streaming rights for sure.
Interesting. Yeah. And it does feel like, over the last 2 years or so, Netflix has kind of like dwindled. Like there's not as much interest in their original content and things like that. It's kind of come to a standstill. So it's kind of a way to maybe revitalize Netflix as well,
Yeah.
and get them in the game with some of the other big players. So, a lot of sports news, as you mentioned, a lot of news in the NBA. We've got a trade we'll touch on. We've got coaching changes. We've got coach player beef that's kind of interesting to look at. We've got a little bit of the GOAT conversation, but a little bit different than what we've been talking about before. So a lot to get into. We'll say before we get started, just make sure that you are subscribed. If you're already subscribed, we really appreciate your support. Check us out on social media, anywhere you're doing that. You can check us out on YouTube and anywhere you're checking out podcasts. Search Hoopsology Podcast, or the social medias are at Hoopsology Pod. So Justin, let's get into it. And first thing, news that just came in late yesterday from Sham Sharania. Justin, Miami is nearing a trade to acquire Charlotte's Terry Rozier for a package sending Kyle Lowry and draft compensation that includes a first-round pick, league source tells The Athletic. Well, no longer have to worry about that because the trade is official. Terry Rozier, before he was banished to the Charlotte Hornets, you may remember him as a player who could score in bunches on the Boston Celtics. They used to call him Scary Terry. So interesting deal. There had been rumors around Kyle Lowry for a long time, since before and leading into the season. Justin, your initial thoughts on this trade? I know you were high on Miami coming into the season. How does this impact your outlook on them?
Yeah, I like this trade a lot. Credit to StatMuse for these stats I'm about to read. Damian Lillard, 25 points a game. Terry Rozier, 24 points a game. Lillard, 6.8 assists. Rozier, 6.7 assists. You have Rozier with a higher 3-point percentage and a field goal percentage as well. So to me, very comparable. I think it's an upgrade from Kyle Lowry. You have to give credit to Kyle Lowry, though. I think it was Jeremy Taché, a former guest on our show. He did say, I mean, you take a look at since he got there, the success the Miami Heat has gotten, and Lowry played a huge role in that. So we can't dismiss his role on that team. But overall, I think this is an upgrade, and this is something. Hey, with the Heat, we kind of talk about they're kind of lackadaisical in the regular season sometimes. It's kind of what to make of them. This is a power move to make a statement in terms of seeding in the Eastern Conference and in the playoffs as well. So I like this trade for them.
Yeah, I love this trade as well. Terry Rozier is someone who can score in bunches, but the criticisms were that he flies off the handles a little bit. Miami, you put him in that system, there's already a hierarchy in place there. There's, I hate to say it again, but heat culture. There's all those things in place where it really feels like if any team is going to be able to harness a player like that, it's going to be the Miami Heat. It makes them more dangerous. He's a younger, more athletic, more threatening player than Kyle Lowry at this point in Kyle Lowry's career. And you wonder, it sounded like Charlotte is going to look to trade Kyle Lowry or try to find something for him. Maybe it's a buyout. I don't know, wherever Kyle Lowry would like. So looks like a move into more rebuilding, more development for Charlotte with their young core. There's also been a lot of talks this week, and not to get off topic too much, but Miles Bridges is a target of several teams. So that could be another player that we look at who, I mean, there's rumors right now that the Suns are interested in Miles Bridges. I don't know how they would bring him on, but there may be more movement in Charlotte before the trade deadline. But back to the point with Terry Rozier. Yeah, I mean, there's no negatives here for the Heat. You've got an aging core, Bam being your centerpiece, but really Jimmy Butler, who has carried the load for them. He doesn't necessarily have a lot more time at this elite level, we would assume, especially with all the battles he's been in. So this is a way, I think it makes sense to give up this first round pick to move off that Lowry deal and add some more talent. I'm with you. I love the move here.
Yeah, agreed.
So right into our next topic, Justin. We've got several topics to cover and stuff to dig into. So, and by the way, I haven't heard anyone being negative on that Terry Rozier deal. But moving on, we have a really interesting situation developing in Milwaukee. First and foremost, Adrian Griffin fired with a 30-13 record, second place in the Eastern Conference. Chemistry just not working out here. There was the incident, you'll likely recall, Justin, where Terry Stotts and him got into a little spat at shoot-around before a game very early in the season, may have even been preseason. And later that night, Terry Stotts resigns, who, of course, was Damian Lillard's head coach for many years on the Portland Trailblazers, kind of acting in an assistant coach, advisor kind of role to Adrian Griffin. So we see a clash there. That was kind of a weird blip that happened. We weren't really sure if it was something between him and Dame or something between him and Coach Griffin. Now we know it was between him and Coach Griffin. So that was odd. There was also a very different approach with Milwaukee's defensive scheme that caused some unsureness towards the beginning of the year. There was a little bit more struggling going on for Milwaukee. And the players basically, I think, worked with him and kind of pulled him back on that. Like, hey, this isn't working. Let's stick with what has worked well for us for several years. And, I guess maybe to Coach Griffin's credit, he was receptive and he did listen to those players. But at the end of the day, it just seems like there is a vote of no confidence for the players to Adrian Griffin, as far as we can tell. So in spite of that 30-13 record, he didn't seem to them to be the man to lead them to the promised land. Justin, what were your thoughts hearing the news about him being fired before we get into the next bit of this story?
Yeah, so I have a different perspective, and that's from a sports media perspective. So a lot of confusion as to where this news was coming from.
Yeah.
If you're watching the NBA on TNT, now it's Candace Parker, Shaq, and I'm blanking on the other two names there. But the news came in, and this is airing at the same time as the New Hampshire presidential primary. And it's just they made it seem like CNN broke the story. So I'm like, don't you have politics to worry about? So they said that it was CNN Sports that broke the story. So I can confirm that there is CNN Sports. There is a Twitter account that is CNN Sports. And there was a story that said that Doc Rivers was going to become the head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, what's interesting is that on TNT, if you watch, Chris Haynes is their reporter. So Chris Haynes is kind of their Woj, he's their Shams. So to bypass Chris Haynes and to ignore what he was saying, because I think he said he didn't 100% confirm that Doc Rivers was going to be the head coach of the Bucks. I think it was headed that way, but he didn't confirm that. To just say, these random reporters for CNN Sports, it seemed weird to me. So we'll see what happens. That could be a big thing, little thing. Regarding what you said, Matt, about
Well, hold on. And by
yeah.
the way, Doc Rivers currently working for ESPN, not even Turner Sports. So you have kind of this weird like crossover dynamic there too, where Doc has been calling games for ESPN, and then the rival network, Turner Sports or CNN Sport breaks that news. It's just very interesting. And then what I'm hearing, and then I'm sorry, Justin, I'll let you continue here, but what I'm hearing right now is that has been a little bit walked back, and it's not quite official yet that Doc Rivers is their next head coach. So I don't know if there are deal discussions being done, or things seem to be a little up in the air last I heard.
That's interesting because Woj said that he is going to be their head coach. It's a deal in principle.
All right.
And that's 8 hours ago. So
there we go.
We'll see what happened. But that's what I read. It said I'm reading from Wojnarowski.
So they're just negotiating the deal, but he's the guy.
Yeah, they're negotiating a high-level assistant coach under consideration to join Doc Rivers as well. So it seems like it's a done deal. I mean, once the story
Doc Rivers has an incredible agent.
Yeah, because the story broke and there was rumors about Doc Rivers, and it wasn't even like no one said, "Oh, Doc Rivers is it's in stone. He's going to the Bucks." It was already floated out there, which is interesting, which you'll break down that component. We can talk about that later. But in terms of the Adrian Griffin part of this, I mean, I understand JJ Redick was pretty shocked about this based on his reaction. But I think it was necessary. I think this is a very critical year for Damian Lillard and with Giannis.
Oh, yeah.
And it seemed like, Lillard was pretty stifled in this offense. And to me, I don't understand why there's a trend of hiring first-year coaches with, great rosters. I think we've seen that.
Joe Mazzulla. He's not a first-year coach anymore, but yeah.
I mean, even you saw with Jason Kidd struggle.
Yeah.
You saw with Steve Nash. It's just like, why are we doing this? Like, you need somebody who's fully experienced. And when you have Mark Jackson every year, it's like he clearly wants to coach. His name comes up in terms of, he's out there, he's doing commentary. He's not even on ESPN anymore. So, why isn't he not selected? That seems very fishy to me. I don't think it's racism. I mean, there's plenty of black coaches in the NBA. So it seems like we're missing something in terms of why Doc Rivers immediately got this position instead of somebody like Mark Jackson, who's been rumored every single year for a coaching position, but not get that final slot. So I just find that pretty interesting, especially with the baggage that Doc Rivers has, and which we'll get to in a point. It just seems very fishy to me. And I understand if you take Doc Rivers's um, resume out of this, he's been advising Adrian Griffin. He's been advising
Well,
the
that's
Bucks.
what's fishy. He was
Yeah,
a consultant
he was
for
correct.
Coach Griffin.
Correct.
So it's
Yeah,
kind of
that too.
a little bit odd. Like you wonder
Yeah,
if there was some backstabbing going on or what happened. And maybe not, certainly this is all speculation,
yeah,
but you're consulting for that team. And then the guy you were, being the mentor to,
yeah.
you he gets out of the way and then you're put in place as the head coach. It's
We're going to hear
it's
something about this.
unusual,
Yeah, it
unusual to
is.
say the least.
It's fishy, but go ahead with the Doc Rivers side of this.
Yeah, no, I find it interesting. Of course, he had been joining Bill Simmons on Bill Simmons' show, and uh, yeah, it seemed like Bill Simmons was pretty surprised based on what he was saying. He's, of course, disappointed for his own
Of course.
his own selfish interests
Well,
because
maybe
he won't
not.
have Doc Rivers as a guest.
Oh, wow, he can
But you
sabotage the
never know.
Bucks. He can sabotage the Bucks and make it wide open for the Celtics. So, I mean, it might be good for him and a net positive in the long run.
I guess that's true. Yeah. I think, what this shows is, yeah, I make the joke about Doc Rivers' agent. I'm sure he does have a great agent. But also, I think Doc Rivers, just even though he won his title back in '08, he still just continues to have the respect of the players around the league. And I think a lot of that is just Doc is a very likable guy. I think even when Doc is giving his analysis or when he has made podcast appearances and things like that, you can see that he's skilled as an educator and a teacher. Like he makes things very easy to understand, and I think he's just kind of straightforward and blunt about things when it comes to his analysis. And I would assume he's very much the same way on the basketball court as well, and when he's coaching on the sidelines. So I think he gives a steady hand. I don't know that he's the guy I would say I would want scheming to figure out how to revitalize a Milwaukee Bucks defense that has struggled, has just been, not the same. You get a new major piece with Damian Lillard and you lose Drew Holiday. It's just a different roster. The guy I would want that I'm shocked that they didn't hire, and I know everyone's mentioning this, but it bears repeating because he was a top 3 finisher, was Nick Nurse.
Yeah.
And he's having
True.
great success in Philadelphia. It seems like he should have been the mastermind for the Bucks to hire, but maybe that just he obviously did not get the thumbs up from Giannis potentially, or there was some sort of disconnect there. I know initially we did hear that Coach Griffin had the support to be hired, but I think that quickly turned into regret on the players' side after his leadership, seemingly after just a month or two into the job. So just wild turn of events, but this is how the modern NBA is, and it has been this way in the past to an extent. I think it just happens a lot quicker in the modern era. These things get hashed out really quickly. Go ahead.
Yeah, totally. And it just seems, you mentioned Nick Nurse, and I have to bring up Becky Hammond too. And to me, it just seems there is some sexism at play, in my opinion. I mean, she just won the title for the WNBA. She was under the coaching tree of, Coach Popovich for, years. And her name has come up in terms of being interviewed for jobs. But yet, these first year coaches get opportunities that they have no coaching experience. Yet she spent years under Coach Pop. Like, highly revered, one of the greatest coaches of all time in all of basketball. So, it just seems peculiar, with Mark Jackson, it just seems just like some guys get just all these opportunities and other people can't get one. So it just seems just highly suspicious to me. Regarding Doc Rivers, Stephen A. Smith had this to say, and I don't know if you believe this or not. He said he's good friends with Doc Rivers. Sure, that's true. He said, quote, "If Doc Rivers doesn't succeed at his job, my prediction is that this will be his last head coaching position in the NBA." And he noted that he has blown a 3-1 lead 3 times in a row. So To
Yeah,
me,
not a great
I
track record. In
honestly,
the
I
last
disagree with that. I just think if he just happens to take him to the finals and if they lose, like there's gonna be coach, teams all over the league wanting Doc have a chance to get Doc Rivers if the Bucks just fire him or something. Like I just it's hard for me to believe if he struggles with the Bucks in terms of a Eastern Conference Finals or a NBA Finals, and if they lose in just kind of a dramatic fashion, if the Bucks part ways, but I don't see that happening. But if they do, they're paying for three coaches already. I mean, it's crazy. I think there's three coaches on the books currently, so they could have to ride Doc Rivers for a little bit in terms of unless they get these coaches off the books somehow. So to me, I just think if this doesn't work out, it's hard for me to believe that he's just going to be just exiled from the league, especially his track record.
Well,
Despite
let's
his
also give
success.
Doc this. Like
Yeah,
Doc Giannis is the greatest individual player that Doc will have ever coached.
easily,
If he truly is taking this job, he's
easily
never had an individual talent like this. His teams
better than Embiid.
have always. Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
I think so.
yeah. Okay.
I mean, at least at this point in their careers,
Okay.
we have to see how the MVP race
Sure.
unfolds and all that stuff. But Giannis has a title, Embiid doesn't. We don't
That's
know
true.
that Embiid's going to win a title. We've seen Giannis go Greek freak mode in the playoffs.
It's true.
Unfortunate injury last season, but the Bucks were the one seed last year. So last year doesn't happen, and maybe Coach Bud is still here, and we're not even talking about this. But I just think it's a different position for Doc to be put in here on this team. It looks a little bit different than other teams he's been on. Like I don't think the Clippers were very tight. There was a lot of drama on that team, and of course between the stars. Whereas I think Giannis really does love his teammates, and there's a better vibe there, and there's also this just different gear they can shift to with the fact that they have Giannis. So maybe Doc just needs to be that steady hand, and the talent that's on the court is going to get the job done. Maybe he'll have more success here. I don't think he's the chess master, that more recently Nick Nurse certainly is. Just comparing those two,
Fair enough.
and there could have been other things. Maybe it would have been worse for chemistry had you brought Nick Nurse in. I mean, I know things had turned very sour in Toronto when Nick Nurse was let go. So you never know. But yeah, the whole situation is is just fascinating.
Yeah, no doubt. It's going to be interesting. A lot of pressure, on that team as well. You mentioned just the media side of things. It seems like it's leaning towards Doris Berg being that lead color position with Mike Breen and them not going through a three-person booth. So that's the rumors I've been seeing on Twitter from pretty reliable sources. So a little bit of a shakeup at ESPN, like you mentioned, Matt. But we'll see. It's going to be entertaining. A lot of pressure, on this Milwaukee Bucks team. We talked about this before the season even started. So even more on the line, especially since Doc Rivers looks like he's poised to take over this team.
Yep. We mentioned Joel Embiid earlier as an elite level talent that Doc Rivers has coached as recently as last season. Speaking of which, he is, from what I've seen, unanimously. It's kind of a question of whether he plays enough games to qualify for MVP or not.
Yeah.
He had an amazing, I believe, only the ninth 70-point performance in NBA history. And this happened the same night as the anniversary of Kobe getting 81 against the Raptors. So Joel Embiid dropped 70 against the Spurs. Wemby unable to stop Embiid. Wemby played, just had a nice 33, but unable to stop Joel Embiid from just going nuts out there. And this, after a lot of talk from Coach Popovich, maybe this is what fueled Joel Embiid to go off on them. Wanted to get your thoughts just because the MVP conversation has been rather quiet at this point. Jokic is still certainly a factor in it. I think depending on how the Bucks do, I do think Giannis deserves praise because I think he's covering up a lot of their flaws there, and the numbers are still decent, still worthy of the conversation. But Embiid, I mean, is having one of the best scoring seasons a center has ever had in this league. So do you agree with this idea that Embiid's the front runner? And do you think there should be a little bit more conversation around the MVP race around the league?
I think so. I think Shea Gilchrist-Alexander deserves a lot of credit.
I'm
I
glad you
mean,
brought him up. Yeah,
I mean, that's huge with the Oklahoma City Thunder. It's not like they're the eighth seed. I mean, they're near the top of the conference, and he's a big reason why. So
they were
I think,
one seed uh,
yeah,
earlier this week. I don't know if they
yeah.
still are, but yeah,
So they deserve. I mean, he deserves a lot of credit. And I think he plays in a small market, so we're near the All Star break. So depending on like how the votes shake out, hopefully the that typically what happens if like guys are under the radar, All Star break happens, they get momentum, especially in that game if he plays well. That's a lot of momentum for him leading to the second half of the season. Regarding Embiid, I think he's the front runner. I mean, JJ Redick said that he's on pace to be the only second player in NBA history to average 35 points, 10 rebounds, and 5 assists for the entire season. The only person to do that was Will Chamberlain, and Chamberlain played 46 minutes, and Embiid has not. So, that's an insane stat. And I think you see, I like the fire within Embiid. You can just tell a lot of players. I mean, I don't think he's just more outward with it and wanting to win. I think Giannis is too. I think, but you're gonna see with Embiid, he's just a man on a mission. Whether he's accomplished that or not, I will see. But you can clearly see that wants to establish himself as a premier big man in this league, and he's doing that. So I would think if he gets hurt, I mean, if he's out for like 10 to 15 games, I think it's over. I just don't think
well, automatically just
it's
based on league
yeah.
rules, I mean, he can
hmm
be disqualified from it.
Yeah, so and that's possible. We've seen him get hurt before. Big men, I mean, they're more prone to injury, and he's playing at such a high level that is likely. So we'll have to wonder if there's going to be maybe a minutes restriction, especially towards the second half of the season, like how that's going to work. I'm sure he wants the MVP. There's a lot of factors at play here, but if he stays healthy, I think he's the clear front runner, in my opinion. And I could honestly, if Shea Gilchrist-Alexander, if the Thunder are like the number one, number two seed, I think
There's a case.
there's a total case for him to be the MVP. But I just don't. I think small market. I think unfortunately they hold that against you. There's just all these BS factors that are irrelevant to play on the court. That unfortunately I think is going to be held against him.
Hey, that's all right. We can get the word out about Shea,
I think.
Justin. We can
Right. That's
start
true.
the conversation
That's
here.
true. Yeah. No doubt.
No, I
True.
I agree with those points about Embiid, and I think the other thing that you and I touched on at the start of the season is the narrative is open for him because of how chaotic the start of the season was with
Yeah.
James Harden's departure from the team. And so that builds up, I mean, them staying at the top of this Eastern Conference with that chaos and with losing some talent on the roster. Now, of course, you can always argue addition by subtraction, but I think it looks really good for an MVP narrative to be able to say they lost one of their all-stars and Embiid carried them still to a home court advantage in the East.
Good point. I didn't think of
So
that.
good, solid narrative there. And I agree with you. I mean, the numbers, of course, are monstrous. And, I thought Jokic should have won MVP last year. I'm not upset that Embiid won it. This year, I think there is a little bit more separation at this point, even though I still pick Jokic as the better player of the two. When we're looking at the context of this season, Embiid just stands out a little bit more, and he's going at it so hard. And when you have performances like this, and he's had 50-point games as well, I think multiple 50-point games. So that does stand out. And if you have enough blips like that too, the MVP voters always like to see that.
Yeah.
It makes the case for them easy to make and justify to their peers. But I love the SGA that you bring that up. And I do think there's this other narrative that like OKC has this super awesome roster, which they do. But I think when you consider that he's kind of the veteran on that team, and they're all like many of the starters are 20, 21.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
SGA kind of the veteran leading them. There's a case to be made there too. We'll
Yeah.
touch on that more as we get past the All-Star break and get into the final stretch of the season, I'm sure, as will the rest of the media. Looking at another high-scoring performance here, Justin, Karl Anthony Towns drops 62 points on the Charlotte Hornets, but it comes in a loss. And his coach was not happy, actually benched him in the fourth quarter. I found this to be very interesting. I'm going to pull up the audio from this.
Times when just because you've scored 2 or 3 or 4 points in a row or baskets in a row doesn't, obviously we're going to try to feed a hot hand, look for a hot hand, but at some point we got to get back to making the right play. We got to get back to doing the right things. That's just, like I said, there's a lot of ways to be immature. There's always a lot of ways to be immature. And there was a lot of immature performances here throughout the roster. We totally disrespected the game ourselves. And we got exactly what we deserve. So,
Chris, did you also see, did it turn into Karl trying to hunt like a big number?
But for a while, it was going. But, down the stretch, you kind of dried up for us. But, yeah. And there's lots of times when
Coach Chris Finch of the Timberwolves unhappy after the way the Timberwolves played against the Charlotte Hornets. I think it's justified to be upset if you drop a game to a Hornets team that you should beat as one of the top seeded teams in the Western Conference. Justin, your initial reaction to all of this?
Yeah, not much to say here. I agree with you. The Timberwolves are having a great season. And this is to the point of when you're just chasing individual accolades and you're losing sight of the main goal, which is winning. And this is where you're going to get into a situation to the playoffs. It's not tolerable. Like, you will lose to teams that are inferior to you if you're not, keeping discipline. And this is a good example for that. And Karl Anthony Towns, he's a leader of this team. And I hold him directly responsible. Because of this, even though other players may have been feeding him, I think it's his job as a leader to be like, hey, I know, I'm on fire or whatever, but we're losing here. We need to adjust the game plan for us to win. And I just think on the surface, this seems, because I like Karl Anthony Towns, and I know he takes a lot of crap. It's based on the Jimmy Butler situation, but I feel that it was pretty much a bit selfish. I don't know directly of him, but kind of for him not taking more of a lead role in preventing that from happening. I think it falls on his shoulders. And I agree with Finch in terms of, his reactions to that. That's an inexcusable loss. You take a look at the record, people might say, what's the big deal? But, with this roster and with Anthony Edwards, this is a team that is, you want to be poised to make some noise in the Western Conference to, make a run for the championship. You can't lose that way. So I agree with his anger.
Given the history of this franchise too, and kind of the almost like a curse that they're trying to break at this point.
Agreed.
For legitimacy in the NBA. I'm 100% with you, and I'm 100% with Coach Finch. I think that's good coaching. He diagnosed that team, their critical weakness, I think at this point, he diagnosed right off the bat. Even with Rudy Gobert, who really is the vet on this team, and Mike Conley, but Rudy Gobert specifically, we've seen moments where he's kind of like in this game, there's a clip that went around of him shoving one of the Hornets players to the ground because he got frustrated with a play. And that's, a case of a little bit of a lack of discipline or immaturity, as Coach Finch put it. I can see why he's angry, and he diagnosed that perfectly. Now, in credit to those players, I also want to say that I looked at friend of the show, Dane Moore's feed regarding what players had been saying, and specifically their young star, Anthony Edwards. And basically, I don't have the direct quote up here, but he did relent that, it was kind of silly the way that they played. So I think that's a very big positive to see. I don't think this is going to be an Adrian Griffin situation. I'm sorry, Coach Griffin, but I don't think that that Coach Finch is losing the locker room over this, which, sometimes when you call out your players like this, I mean, we look at like Pat Riley called out Heat players after they lost in the finals and LeBron left to Cleveland. That may not have been directly just because of that. Obviously, it's multi-factored there. But point being, sometimes when you're a coach, like, you're easily the scapegoat and you got to watch what you say. So I respect that Coach Finch didn't back off. And I respect the players, from what I've seen so far, responding well to that.
Yeah, it's a players' league.
Bodes well for them.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. So one last topic to get to here, Justin, that was just interesting, and also was included another friend of the show, Dwayne Rankin. We had a little bit of a discussion with Kevin Durant. We have our buddy Josh, as longtime listeners of the show know, he's a big Suns fan. So granted, he gets KD on that team. He's super excited about them. I don't blame him. I'd be excited if KD came to my team too. Anyway, Kevin Durant is asked why he isn't mentioned in the GOAT conversation. And he says, quote, "Because I went to the Warriors, why shouldn't I be in that? That's the question you should ask. Why not? What haven't I done?" And there we have the quote. As far as the GOAT conversation, I think when I see an honest conversation, Justin, about Kevin Durant as the GOAT, I usually see it framed in the light of KD is the most talented small forward that we've ever seen. Like, there's kind of actually to compare him with his teammate Kyrie Irving. There's sort of like, there's this aura around Kyrie Irving. Like, this guy has mythical handles. This guy has a scoring package that we've never seen before in this league. You kind of get some parallels with the KD position when you're talking about small forwards in the history of the league. But I just can't, in my best chance, best stab at it, to put KD in like some sort of GOAT ranking or something like that. I really can't scratch top 10 with him. I don't even know if I would have him top 15 or maybe even top 20. I would need to do, of course, more of a deep dive into that. He has 2 finals MVPs, 2 finals to his name, both, of course, coming with that Golden State Warriors dynasty. You and I both have said plenty of times on this show, we love KD's talent and all that. It's just, there have been a lot of misfortunes for him off the court that have kind of taken a hit at the legacy a little bit. I mean, one of the things, the decision to join the Warriors, that was widely criticized. But Justin, how do you feel about this, like trying to plug KD into the GOAT conversation?
I think it's valid. It depends on what GOAT conversation you're talking about. You're talking about like the best 20 players in the league. Sure. I think sure, that's valid. But like you were saying, you're dealing with the top 5 ever in history. I think when we get to these conversations, when you say a guy's not like the GOAT, you're like taking something away from him. Like, he's like not Hall of Famer. Like, he's your first ballot Hall of Famer.
Oh, sure.
I mean, he's going to be one of the greatest. He's one of the greatest players of all time. He's on the 75 best players list. Like, it just seems like if you're not a GOAT, you're just a piece of trash on the side of the street. It's just bizarre to me. And I think to your point about with KD, I feel it's kind of ironic because he got criticized for going to the Warriors, but that's kind of his undoing, him leaving. Like, if he stays, how many titles do they win? Even if he does get, one of those things, he got hurt, they lose to Toronto, but if he just sticks it out, I mean, to me, who knows where the Warriors are at, to be honest, if he can kind of work it out with Draymond and everything. So I feel like you take a look at him leaving, to me, a black mark is OKC. I mean, you have Westbrook, you have Harden. Granted, they're younger, but still use 3 of you. Couldn't get it done. You take a look at the Warriors, which I do give him full credit for. He's the MVP, and he was a big contributor to those teams. Full credit to him. And then with the Nets, I hold that against him. That was the whole mastermind, that whole plan failure. And so far with the Suns, you have all this talent. I mean, they're mediocre. Like and I think for him to worry about the GOAT conversation now when your team is mediocre, like that shows a bit of selfishness, in my opinion. To me, a real leader would be like, hey, like I'm not really worried about the GOAT conversation right now. I worry about my team, us being the top of the Western Conference, and that's on me. Like to worry that being his BS rivalries and being your burner accounts by you being the GOAT, that should be the least of your concerns right now. If you're a GOAT, then you're not worried about this. You're worried about winning at all costs. You don't care about this conversation. So to me, I think it's a bit selfish. I mean, he's a basketball nerd. I get it. And to me, those conversations are more for the offseason. Hey, he's chill on his boat in Paris and, he hears about this. Cool. Have debate away. But during the season here, he has one primary job, and that's to get the Phoenix Suns to the NBA Finals. And to worry about this insignificant conversation, I think it's a waste of his time. So.
Yeah, it does seem like I've seen Kobe and Jordan both take, GOAT type of questions the way that you just mentioned. Like, basically, that's going to be for you all to decide once I'm retired, and then, like, let's not push it any further than that or whatever. I mean, with this generation of players who are, KD and LeBron, very close in age to us, Justin. There's a little bit more of just readiness to assert themselves into this conversation. Like LeBron on his own show said 2016, that finals victory made him the GOAT. I mean, just said it outright, like proclaimed himself. And KD, a little bit more mildly than LeBron in that example, but still kind of is concerned about it, as you said, and inserts himself into it. So it's, for me, I just can't get there. I think making the decision to leave OKC to join Golden State is just a huge black mark. But then even if you want to take narratives out of it and just look at accolades and achievements, you just can't get there. I mean, he has scoring titles. He has an MVP. He has Finals MVPs. He has Finals, but it's all dwarfed by MJ, Kobe, Kareem, several guys that have
Magic,
just
Bird,
accrued those. Yeah. And I think I love the point that you bring up most of all when you said that, it's almost like a Ricky Bobby thing. Like you're either first or you're last. And that's such a bad way to have basketball conversations in general. I mean, it skips so much context of these players' careers because KD is an important player over the history of the NBA.
Yeah, he's a legend.
And that's a wonderful thing, but you're not touching GOAT status. And I'm sorry. And that doesn't mean that we don't like you and acknowledge that you were an incredible player. Like, it's wild that there seems to be this perceived huge gap if you make that point. Like, I know if I'm talking to KD face to face, he's not happy about me just saying that and writing him off as the GOAT.
Well, that's why I hate having these conversations, because it's just, I think it gets very toxic, and I think people don't understand, like, when the honor, what an honor it is to be an elite NBA, to play in the NBA. You know what I mean? Like Jalen Rose said, like you're about 3,000 people that, you're an elite class of athlete. Then you're even more elite to be named the best 75 players in NBA history. And then to be included into like the top 25 players ever to play in the NBA, like globally, ever. And with KD's accolades, they're incredible. And to not be in that GOAT discussion doesn't take anything away from him, doesn't make him like just see. And I think it just, it seems like that's kind of the case. It's like a strike against you if you're not in that GOAT conversation. And I think it's a shame because there's a lot of great players. So I think we kind of, at least I'll speak for myself. I think we kind of blame the older generation for different things, but I think to give the older generation a credit, they appreciate, I think, their legends more. Like, even though they're not the GOAT, I always hear Kenny Smith talking about all these other names, and these guys are legends. Clearly, they're not on the same level as Michael Jordan, but they're legends. Like, they're highly revered, and I just wish we just show the same guys that same respect. And maybe that'd be something that maybe help KD out in this. It's just that, hey, we hold you in such high regard. It's okay. It's okay that you're not like the GOAT. It's all right. Like, you're still an elite player ever. Like, ever in this league. Like, it's all right. It's okay. Like, it's another discussion for, just people to debate, but your legacy is cemented. Like, you are a legend in this sport. And to just be obsessed with this being a GOAT is just like you're just wasting your time. What are you doing?
Yeah. Well, and in fairness, when you're the star player for a franchise for several years, I mean, I could see how, we talk about all the time. You got to have that mentality that you are the GOAT. So there's a disconnect there.
Yeah.
But you're right in that when you're looking at this objectively, and when, the analysts of basketball like you and I are looking on this, we don't want to minimize greatness in our conversation and just live in this fiction where KD is in grasp of Michael Jordan or something like that. I'm sorry. It's just, there is a certain point where you can make subjective cases when you're talking about certain player comparisons and certain GOAT comparisons. And we've done it on this podcast. There gets to be a certain point where there's an objective reality that, I'm sorry, you're not in reach of that. But again, you're great, KD, and both Justin and I agree.
Yeah, no doubt.
So thank you guys so much for supporting the show. If you made it this far and stuck with us, we really appreciate it. We'd love your thoughts on all the topics we discussed today. Let me know. I'd be curious to see where you guys have KD ranked. If you've thought this through, do you have him in the teens? Do you have him top 10? Let us know where you have him in that discussion. I'm going to do some homework and deep dive and try to figure out where I might put him on the list of all the great players that have played this game. Reminder, subscribe, check out our YouTube library, those evergreen episodes. We've been noticing you guys checking out the library. Really appreciate it. As always, for Justin Goodrum, I'm Matt Thomas. We'll see you next time. Peace out.
See you next time. See you later.